Arriving home, after a year's worth of touring, was a strange experience. I'd been so busy doing exciting things that I hadn't actually had a chance to get excited about them at the time. Now that I was home, it all started to sink in. I would get into bed with the intention of sleeping, but then would just remember something we'd accomplished and end up staring wide-eyed at the ceiling for the rest of the night. I couldn't believe that I'd actually played in Russia, Brazil, and Mexico, and I now knew what it was like to tour America in a sleeper bus. As my mind raced, I would remember that I was now in a band that had played on Jimmy Kimmel in America and had supported Ghostface Killer at a star-studded party for Spin magazine. I started to wonder why I hadn't been more excited at the time, or if any of it had really happened at all. Compared to the activities of more successful bands, these were relatively minor accomplishments. God knows how many chart toppers who play nightly sold-out shows in great big, huge fuck-off venues sleep when they come back from tour. As well as lying awake amazed and disorientated that all of my dreams had come true, I was also exhausted. Now that I no longer had the momentum of having to play a show every night, my body was starting to shut down. Hundreds of hangovers caught up all at once. I was suddenly paying for all the boozy fun I'd spent the last couple of years enjoying with what felt like one enormous morning after. I was still excited about writing a new album as I had been when we returned from the first US tour just over a year earlier, but my mind wasn't willing. Whether I was ready or not, studio time had been booked and deadlines had been set. We had to start work on the new record immediately. We had already decided to work with Dan Swift again. EMI wanted us to have a cleaner, more polished pop sound than on the first record. This was fine with me. I quite fancied the idea of being in a pop group. It meant I might get a chance to finally appear on my favourite TV show, Top of the Pops. With the producer sorted, we just needed to start work on the songs. The rest of our brew had already gotten a bit of a head start on this front. They had been writing a lot on tour during our sound checks, while I had been off doing interviews, sleeping on the bus. As a result, we had a lot of music, but no lyrics. I wish I could say this was because I was suffering from writer's block, but that isn't quite true. I was writing a lot. The problem was that I now had an audience in mind when I wrote, and this confused me. With the first album, it had been easy. Even though we had been playing those songs live when I'd written the words, there had been no prospect of recording an album on the horizon. It had still been possible for me to kid myself that what I was doing was a private enterprise. I could sit in my room and write songs about my ex-girlfriend and erectile dysfunction and pretend that I was writing them just for myself. Now with this second album, I felt a whole lot of pressure. I would write something and then decide that it wasn't art brut enough or pop enough, or decide that it wasn't the sort of thing I should be singing about and throw it away. Also, the music art brut were making had changed. I, mistakenly, as it turned out, thought the music they had written sounded a lot more chart-bound now than it had on the previous album. Lyrics along the lines of these historic subjects I'd sung about before, obscure Italian terrorists, the uncontrollable urge I had to dance in art galleries, fantasies about moving to the west coast of America and drinking with Morrissey, would sound out of place over this new style of music. You would think signing to a major label would have given me a massive boost of self-confidence. It hadn't. I was riddled with self-doubt. Now that I had a chance to reach a wider audience, I was paralysed with fear. I was terrified that anything I committed to record would fuck up the opportunity we now had to become successful. The Sophomore Slump, the fabled difficult second album, is a real thing. You have your entire life to write your first album without the burden of anyone else's expectations. Then, all of a sudden, you have a few months to make a follow-up with all eyes on you to see what you do next. The deadlines came and went. In the end, the band started recording without me. I only had the words for one song, a new one called Direct Hit, and only the chorus at that. If Art Brew played any other music, I would have to sit down, ashen-faced, and pretend I was writing some ideas down in a notebook. My notebook really was full of ideas. I had half-written songs about my little sister, Kirk Hammett, the guitar player from Metallica, Bob Dylan, how I thought cities were just as pretty as villages, and countless other wildly inappropriate subjects long since forgotten. I was procrastinating in the worst possible way. Instead of writing entire songs, I was just writing snippets of lyrics and then moving on to a new idea. I was too scared to commit to anything I was writing. Other people started to notice my lack of lyrics. Richard, Art Brew's manager, phoned me almost daily to check on my progress. Dan Swift gave me the phone number of a therapist to speak to, and somebody from EMI raised the idea of sending me to a secluded retreat in Scotland. This last idea did appeal to my sense of the romantic, but I knew it wouldn't help. I had barely been in my own house the last couple of years. If anything, I just needed to sleep in my own bed for a while. As a last-ditch attempt to try and focus my mind on writing the more mainstream songs I thought we needed, I came up with the idea of writing down the titles of 3 randomly chosen, already famous pop hits, and no matter what, writing new lyrics for them. This, thank God, seemed to do the trick. Pump Up the Volume, its title stolen from the pop group Mars, is about, or M-A-R-S, is a song about having to choose between kissing a girl or showing off your useless knowledge of pop trivia in front of her, breaking from a kiss and ruining a romantic moment to impart a snippet of information about the background music is an awful habit I have, one I wish I could stop. This song is meant as an apology to anyone who has suffered from that nervous tic of mine. Sorry, ladies. Jealous Guy, original title by John Lennon, is a song about trying to wake your sleeping girlfriend because you want to prove to her that you have more stamina than her previous boyfriends. Since writing Rusted Guns of Milan for the first album, I've always felt the need to reassert my masculinity by including at least one song in which I'm having sex capably on every album. I Will Survive, named after Gloria Gaynor's hit, is a song about the feeling of liberation I enjoyed when I first left home, despite the appalling conditions in which I lived. When Keith of the Pops first heard this song, he thought it was about the house we were sharing at the time of the album coming out. Despite thinking I'd moved on and survived the situations in the song, it turned out I was still living in them. It was just that this time I was doing so whilst blissfully unaware. Suddenly being able to go into the studio and record the parts for these songs after having been stuck for months felt great. It also got everybody off my back and gave me the confidence to finish the rest of the album. It was like I had broken a seal. I discarded the various notebooks full of half-baked ideas I had been procrastinating in and started a new one. Well, I say discarded. I put them somewhere safe in case I ever got stuck for words again and can maybe salvage something from them. I keep a lot of boxes full of half-thought-out lyrics under my bed for just this reason. Now with added verses, Direct Hit became our most blatant attempt at a straight-up pop song with this classic story of boy meets girl, girl dances with boy. I'd had the chorus with this lyric, "Get on the dance floor, it's a direct hit," for ages. I just couldn't figure out what the hell it was about. Embarrassingly, I've been trying to write a follow-up to Form the Band, a sort of we wrote a hit that deconstructed what a pop song was. This, of course, had been a terrible, presumptuous and impossible idea. Pop songs should just be about dancing and having fun. I hope we managed to achieve that in this song, despite its very cynical beginnings. People in Love was a breakup song I've been writing since we started the album. I was going through a breakup myself at the time, and the original version of the song came from an incredibly dark place. Dan Swift had flat out told me my first version was too miserable to record. He was right. Luckily, by the end of recording the album, I was through the worst of it and could sincerely write about the breakup with a little more perspective. Sound of the Summer is another song about girls and pop music, this time fetishizing at the swapping of mixtapes. Late Sunday Evening is a song of encouragement and comfort for people who are unable to get their shit together and are still lying in bed at 5 p.m. on the last day of the weekend. With all of the lyrics complete and recorded, I had just one thing left to do. Dan Swift and I had decided one of the first songs we'd recorded, Sam Powley, for the album, needed a loud bellowing scream right in the middle of it. I thought a huge scream of relief would sound better than a scream of frustration, so we had waited to the end of the recording sessions, saving it as the last thing to do. Finally, after months of deliberation and false starts, it was time. I took the microphone down the stairs that led away from the control room to the front door of the building, as we had decided the echo of the stairwell would lend an atmosphere to the scream that the live room wouldn't give us. Holding the mic to my mouth, I let out the biggest, most heart-wrenching scream possible. Ah! I felt months of stress leave my body. It was fucking great to be finally done. All that was left to do now was to spend the next few months worrying about what people would think about it. With a massive sense of relief, I threw the microphone down and shut the door to the studio for good. The album was finished. We had done our absolute best to make a pop album. This time we had EMI and Downtown backing us. What could go wrong? We're about to become rich and famous at last. Hooray! I'm going to keep going. Chapter, let's jump ahead. We lose a record label, and then, let's see. Okay, let's jump to chapter 26. Chapter 26, we're going to jump ahead all of the It's a Bit Complicated business and straight to the next album. We lost our record label. That's what happens in the interim. We get dropped from EMI. Here we go. I'm not going to lie. Not having a record label was a bit of a worry. However, Richard, the manager, assured us he would take care of the situation. He seemed fairly confident and always had come through for us in the past, so we put our faith in him and carried on with the actual business of being in a band whilst trying not to worry about it. A lot of my time in Art Brut has revolved around me trying not to think about things. Whether we had a label backing us or not, I wanted to get work on the next album as soon as possible. I was, and still am, very proud of It's a Bit Complicated. It has 2 of what I think are our best songs on it, Nag, 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 and Post Soothing Out. And we had definitely accomplished exactly what we set out to achieve when we started making it. It's an album full of universal themes and very well-produced guitar pop songs. It's just that I felt an emptiness touring it live. I enjoy playing the songs. I thought they sounded great. They were just a feeling I couldn't quite put my finger on, a feeling that something was missing. It took a chance encounter with a man infamous for being selfish, egotistical jerk, but who also happens to be a bit of a genius, at a festival in Denver to help me figure out what. Monolith was at the famous Red Rock Amphitheatre, a legendary outside music venue built amongst the boulders and disc-shaped formations of Denver's Red Rock Park. Just to get to play there was exciting in itself. However, I was even more excited about the fact we were playing just after the Brian Jonestown Massacre, a band that I'd liked for years but had never had a chance to see live. As well as being a fan of the Brian Jonestown Massacre's music, I was also a fan of the film Dig, a documentary chronicling the rivalry between the band and the group the Dandy Warhols. I was especially excited to see if Anton Newcombe, the group's leader and the creative force behind the band, was as unusual a character as is the version of him depicted in the film. I wasn't to be disappointed. Art Brut had only been at the festival for about 20 minutes when Anton turned up. He had just that week finished recording his new album and was looking for somewhere to play it really, really loudly. He had chosen our dressing room because he wanted to borrow a bottle of vodka from me. Their dressing room wasn't ready yet, and he was due on stage in the next hour. I was impressed that he had obeyed the rules of Booze O'Clock, which I'll talk about earlier in the book. The rest of Art Brut, not being as much of a fan of the band as me, and so not recognising Newcombe, all slowly backed out of the door to escape from the ranting, oddly whiskered, shirtless lunatic who had invaded our dressing room. This left just me and Anton in the room while he played me his album. My Bloody Underground, it was called. He played it in its entirety, shouting a blow-by-blow account of what each song was about over the top of the music. The first track was called Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney on Heather Mills's wooden peg, dropping bombs on the White House. I couldn't quite believe my ears. I'm sorry, what's it called? He shouted the title again. Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney on Heather Mills's wooden peg, dropping bombs on the White House. Wow, the opening track on his album really was called Bring Me the Head of Paul McCartney on Heather Mills's wooden peg, dropping bombs on the White House. Impressive. Then, before playing the next song, he told me, this is a neoclassical piece I've written. I'm self-taught at the piano. It's fucking great. A haunting and beautiful piano melody came out of the speakers. I questioned him. It's really great. What's it called? I'm not sure what I was expecting the answer to be, but with the timing of Nigel Tufnell in Spinal Tap telling the camera deadpan that the piece of chamber music he is playing is called Lick My Love Pump, Anton looked at me intensely, put his hand on my arm and said, we are niggers of the world. He seemed even more excited about the next song he was playing. And as he fiddled with adjustments on the CD player, he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a huge, recently removed tooth covered in blood. This next song is about this, he said, brandishing the tooth in his hand. It's called Infinite Wisdom Tooth. This freaked me out a little. So nervously, laughing, I asked what I presume would be a stupid question. Wow, is that one of your teeth? He shook his head sadly and said, no, man, it's not mine. That's some fucked up shit right there, nodding at the tooth, before solemnly putting it back in his pocket. It was at this point that everything began to seem a bit unreal, and I started to wonder if I was in a dream again. I was definitely aware that I was in the middle of somebody's psychotic episode. I just couldn't work out if it was mine or his. Luckily, at that moment, to bring some well-needed reality back to proceedings, a steward from the festival arrived to ask me to sign a release form for our set so it could be broadcast live on the radio. Anton, turning his album down, asked if there was a form for him to sign too. The steward apologised and told him that his band was playing too early in the day to be part of the festival that would be on the radio. This would have embarrassed some people, but Anton just shrugged it off, looked at me and said, yeah, I understand, we're not really a commercial band like you. I should not have let this affect me. Anton was clearly saying it because he wanted to feel better about not getting on the radio. As a comment, though, it really stung. He was right. I was in a more commercial band than the one he was in. For example, we don't have a song with titles like Automatic Faggot for the People. It was just that all of my favourite albums are either by strange people locked away in their bedrooms making music for themselves, obscure punk bands, or arty lunatics. And while I am none of these things, I had never thought that what Art Brut were doing was commercial. Somewhere in my psyche, I still aligned us with those bands. I didn't feel stunned because I saw the word commercial as an outright insult either. Every band, despite what they may say, wants to be as successful as possible, to be heard by as many people as they can. Anton, for example, quite obviously wanted to be played on the radio. Of course, I want to sell shitloads of records and become rich and famous. I understand that for this to happen, I have to be more accepted by the mainstream. I would love what Art Brut do to become commercial. I live in hope of a day when a man shouting over a punky racket becomes fashionable. What had actually upset me about Anton's comment was that it made me realise that with our last album, I had actually been trying to be commercial. I hadn't been writing for myself, but I attempted to write for a broader audience, and by doing that, I had sacrificed something. It had been a wonderful feeling playing the song Direct Hit to millions and millions of people on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. But now I was asking myself how much better it would have felt if instead of singing the lyrics of my cynical and, as it turned out, futile attempt at a hit, I'd instead performed a song about something I cared about, or a true story, something that defined me as a person and contained my personality. I'd successfully written songs like this for the first album without even thinking about it. However, sometime during the writing process where it's a bit complicated, something had gone awry with me. I had got my intentions confused. I had seen the chance of a career as a musician and gone for it without thinking about what I really enjoyed about being in a band, the connection I make on a personal level with people through my lyrics. I like people coming up to me after we play and talking to me about Emily Kane, their Emily Kanes, or telling me they were as concerned about their own brothers as I am about my little one. I always feel that Art Brut shows could be like, hopefully, a very large gathering of friends. And ironically, by trying to make our newer songs more universal, I'd somehow left out the element that did that. There's something that I had been feeling missing from it. It's a bit complicated. It was me. I was determined with our next album, I would rectify that and put as much of myself into the lyrics as possible. Anton played an incredible show at the Brian Jonestown Massacre. Before they performed, he had told me of his plan to change his clothes from an all-white outfit to an all-black outfit halfway through the set. I don't know why he wanted to do this, but I was impressed when he carried out his plan, even though there was no side of the stage. He just stood slightly to the left of the stage, took all his clothes off before changing into the other outfit. I'd been proud of appearing naked in The Enemy, and there was this guy stood pretty much totally naked on stage at the legendary Red Rocks Amphitheatre. Not wanting to be outdone, the thought briefly crossed my mind to follow suit, or lack of suit, when it was our turn to play. I definitely wasn't brave enough, although when I came off stage, I did notice my fly was undone, so I had come close. Also, on leaving the stage and returning to the dressing room, I found an unopened bottle of vodka waiting for me. Anton had been a little late, but a man of his word. There you go.